Alright you guys, as you can see by the thumbnail, this one's gonna be a little bit different. So I know some of you might be wondering why I'm doing this video in this format, and I'm just gonna give you guys the simple version. For me, it's faster to get content like this out, and this was a last minute thing. Besides that, I'm not easy to look at, so I'm sure some of you are okay with this either way. But let me get straight to it. So last night, as I was finishing up on a couple of stories that I'm getting ready to drop for you guys, I got a call from one of my boys who's been housed in Donovan for the last few years now. This is somebody who I stay in regular contact with, but the purpose of that call was to tell me about an incident that kicked off over there on A Yard where he's been at. So before I get into the details of this incident, let me just say this. For those of you who have been watching my channel for the long haul, you guys know that I really don't follow politics of the groups or gangs on the S&Ys, nor do I involve myself in any of that. It's just not something I've taken a lot of interest in. But there's always the exception, and this is it. So, I recall a few months back, my boy telling me that Snoop, Maurice Vasquez, had pulled up to the yard, and that at some point he had crossed paths with him. And from the onset, my boy really didn't care for him. I don't think it was anything personal or anything like that. I got the impression that it probably had something to do with Snoop's antics and the way he carried himself out there on the yard. So I've been aware of the fact that Snoop was out there on the yard with him for quite some time now. I never ran anything on him, never tried to get an interview or anything like that, because for one, I just never had any interest. And for two, I'm just not one of his groupies that's salivating to have a story about him on my channel. Not only that, but there's already a wealth of information out there without my 2 cents. Now that I got all that out the way, let me get into the details about why my boy reached out last night. So my boy's the kind of cat that stays out of the drama. He doesn't get involved with the S&Y politics, and he pretty much stands on his own 2 feet. But that's not to be misconstrued. He's no slouch by a long shot, and he's not someone you'd want to push up on. Just trust me on that. He stays to himself and he keeps his circle small, but he talks to everyone. So Solo, Michael Mendoza, is someone that's been there with him for a while now, and he's spoken to him frequently. But Solo apparently stepped back from the rider movement and has been focused more on his newfound spiritual awakening. Solo found his spiritual enlightenment in the religious belief of Sikhism, or Sikh. This is not to be confused with being Muslim. This is a religion that was founded more than 500 years ago in Punjab, North India. So they don't pray to Allah. There's a guru by the name of Nanak Devi Ji, and he has 9 successors that are known as gurus, which is a term for spiritual guide or teacher. Sikhs believe that people of all faiths worship one divine being who created this world and lives within it. The notion of divine presence leads to the belief that divine is equally present in all people, and that therefore every human being is equal in the eyes of God. So Solo was apparently very serious about this Sikh religion he was practicing, so much so that my boy said whenever he'd see him on the yard, he'd put his hands together as if he was praying and greet him like this. The other thing about Solo is that he was described as being a borderline J-Cat and is classified as being on EOP, Enhanced Outpatient Program. I don't know him, so that's not my description. That's how he was described to me. But according to my boy, he was doing his own thing and had stepped back from pushing the politics. So at some point, another individual named Champ from San Jose lands on the yard who had just come from C Yard. Like Solo, Champ had also stepped back from the rider movement as he had claimed to find his own spiritual awakening in God. Champ was forthright about this and would basically tell anyone who would ask. But here's the thing, my boy had a lot of in-depth conversations with Champ and spoke to him almost daily due to the fact that he was assisting him with his legal endeavors. And according to my boy, Champ only started claiming his religion during the time he was on C Yard. Now, I don't want to get too much into the politics of all this, as I'm sure there's other channels out there that can articulate this better than me. But my boy seemed to think Champ stepping away from the rider movement had something to do with the 2-5ers on C Yard pushing up on him real hard. The 2-5ers supposedly have issues with the Northern Riders on C Yard because of what Scrappy did. But whether it was that or something else, This is when Champ started claiming to be Christian. So at some point, Champ goes back to the county on an appeal. While he was OTC for his appeal, this is when Snoop pulls up. Snoop ends up selling up with Solo. He gets a job working in the program office as a clerk, and it looks like he's starting the program. My boy said that when Snoop first hit that yard, that he went on a recruitment blitz. But then at some point realized that that yard wasn't a good place to recruit. I didn't ask what that meant, but reading between the lines, I'm assuming that this meant that the rider movement wasn't really getting a strong push on that yard, and that at some point Snoop realized this. So while Champ's OTC, my boy said that he could see that Solo was starting to change, that he was reverting back to being a rider, and that Snoop obviously brought him back into the fold. I mean, think about it. They're in the cell together. Snoop was influencing him. So now, instead of the praying hand greeting that he had been doing for months, now Solo was back to stomping around on the yard and was greeting my boy like everyone else. That Cali half-hug handshake that we all do. So here's the other thing. Champ was sentenced to LWOP. He didn't have a date. He was doing life without the possibility of parole. And his whole purpose for going back on his appeal was obviously so he could try to get a date. But that didn't happen. What did happen is that they knocked off the LWOP and resentenced him to life with a determinate sentence, or life with the possibility of parole. So although Champ didn't have a definitive date, he was scheduled for what's called a suitability hearing. This is when you go back to the board as a lifer to see if they're going to deem you to be eligible for parole. This is the closest or next best thing to getting an actual date. You go from having LWOP, life without the possibility of parole, to now seeing daylight. So Champ ends up back on the yard after coming back from OTC, and he's obviously pumped up based on the fact that he got the LWOP knocked off. But as soon as he comes back, my boy tells him that Snoop's on the yard and that he's housed in 5 Block. Champ, on the other hand, didn't seem to be worried about it though, which my boy found to be kind of odd based on everything he knew about Champ's predicament. So Snoop had been putting it out there openly that if you were a rider or if you were part of that movement and you landed on C Yard, that you had 72 hours to handle your business and get off that yard. Otherwise, he would consider you to be no good. But Champ stayed out there on that yard and programmed out there, and Snoop obviously found out about it. But again, Champ was being real lackadaisical about it and didn't seem to be concerned. Maybe because he either seen Snoop working in the program office doing his own thing and he knew he didn't have a strong following on that yard, or maybe because a significant amount of time had lapsed and Snoop had never approached him. Whatever it was, he didn't seem like he was worried about it. But my boy said he started seeing changes in Snoop that led him to believe that he was up to something, or that something wasn't right. His exact words were, "My spidey senses started tingling." He said he could see it. He said in retrospect, now that he thinks back on it, he could see all the red flags. And this led to him urging Champ to address it on some level. My boy's sharp enough to know that when you have those types of open-ended issues going on, that you don't just sit around and wait for something to happen. You either address it or you get rid of it yourself. So he pushed Champ to approach Snoop just to at least see if he could get a feel of the waters or to see if there was any kind of lingering animosity. So Champ finally took his advice and approached Snoop on the yard. When Champ walked up to Snoop and tried talking to Snoop, Snoop basically said, "Who are you? I don't even know who you are." Snoop definitely knew who he was, but this was obviously his way of being dismissive and turning a cold shoulder on him. So Champ, taking offense to this, says, "Oh, okay, it's like that, huh?" Snoop said, "Just like that." Now, I'm not advocating for violence, but this is prison. And in this situation, Champ should have seen the writing on the wall and he should have handled his business. There was a lingering threat on the yard and he allowed it to fester. Maybe the fact that Champ getting the LWOP knocked off was the defining reason why he wouldn't allow himself to get into any kind of mischief. But in a situation like this, you have to be smart. Snoop waited for 2 solid months to rock this guy back to sleep before he made his move. And that's exactly what happened. Champ was comfortable and was focused on other things. While he's enrolling in all these self-help programs and working on doing all the positive things that might help him at board, Snoop was plotting and strategizing his next move. So Snoop and Solo ended up running in the 3 building and catching Champ at the most vulnerable time possible while he was in the shower. Whether they had someone else in that building working in concert with them to let them know when he was in the shower, or whether it was by mere luck, either way, they ran in building 3 and caught Champ butt naked in the lower B section shower. When you go into a building and you come out of the sally port, which is like a hallway leading into the building, the lower B shower is straight ahead. So they ran in there with bone crushers. According to my boy, they had some nasty pieces, and they got this guy when he was butt naked at his most vulnerable time, knowing he wouldn't be able to defend himself and knowing that he wouldn't have a banger on him at that time either. And my boy said they butchered him. They didn't stop hitting him until he was down and was no longer even trying to protect himself. They just kept hitting him. The gunner didn't even shoot. By the time they realized that somebody was getting moved on, they had already made a bloody mess out of him. Apparently, Champ was unresponsive before he was even put on a gurney and taken out of the building. Donovan is still slammed down right now because of this incident, but my boy talked to the inmate who they call in to clean up any type of hazardous material, blood, urine, feces, spit, etc., etc. And he described what he saw. He said he's cleaned up a lot of crime scenes, including stabbings, cell fights, and other homicides. But he said he hasn't seen that much blood that came from one incident since he's been doing it. So there you have it. I'm sure there will be a lot more forthcoming information that you guys will hear in the coming days, and I'm sure it's going to be milk for everything it's worth. But this is one and done for me. Like I said, I usually don't cover the politics on SMYs, but this one was the exception and hit close to home for several reasons. Prison's a cold and unforgiving environment. You have to play by the same type of savvy and shrewd set of rules as everyone else. Your survival and your ability to navigate in those types of environments depends on your mental fortitude, your politic game, and your ability to detect changes in the monotony. How many times have I said that in my stories? These can literally be lifesavers, or if you're lacking, reasons why you can lose your life. Not everybody is able to hone in on these things. You miss something, you allow yourself to become too complacent, or you miscalculate someone else's intentions, and it could literally mean game over for you. And again, even though Champ didn't have a definitive release date, he was in a much better position to get a real shot at going home. He's seen daylight for the first time in however long he's been down. But just when he was given a little bit of hope and a chance at making it back home, someone else comes along and wipes all those hopes away. Be thankful you're free and that you don't have to wake up every day and live in environments like this. Especially for those of you youngsters out there who think there's something about being in prison that's worth glorifying. Trust me, there's nothing about prison to glorify. And although I'm sure there's a lot of you out there who probably think you can survive in there, I'm sure every last one of these guys that have met their demise, I'm sure they all thought the same thing themselves. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick update. I'm going to try to get another story out to you guys tonight that I was working on before this came up. It's just going to come down to whether or not I can get it all done in time. YouTube is flagging a lot of videos. Every one we release is literally a crapshoot, so we'll see what happens. If you guys enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. But either way, drop a comment and let me know what you think. Until the next one, this is your boy B, and I'm gone.